comes, we can let them in and join us. Maybe I say a few words first. Thank you all for coming today here. Thanks Sasha for organizing such an amazing event. Thanks Chris and Nick. This is really an honor, like for me. Back 2 years back, I just was dreaming about this world, and now we're here talking about it in VR, which is just an amazing thing to do and have. And hey, Oliver, hello.
Hello.
And
hey, Oliver.
Yeah, so this is just an amazing. Thanks a lot for coming. I am pretty sure we'll have a great discussion about all the variety of topics. And yeah, let's just have fun. Maybe let's come here a little bit like in a circle, and yeah, let's kick it off.
And we're okay here, Arthur, or should we?
Yeah, we're all fine. I mean, we're all fine here.
Okay. Awesome. All right, I guess I'm gonna. We're just gonna get started. Are you ready, Nick? We can just. We can get started.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
All right, so we'll get started right away. Hello, everyone. I am Cris Miranda. I host the EnterVR podcast, and today I'm joined by Professor Nick Dungey from the Dungey State University podcast. Professor, is there anything you'd like to say to introduce yourself, or should we just get started? What do you think?
Well, Chris, it's a pleasure to be with you. Arthur and Sasha, it's really quite an honor to be in your space. Thank you for inviting me. I'm absolutely blown away by what you've created, and I'm excited to be here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Professor. Yeah. I think, yeah, and yes, definitely thank you, Somnium Space, for hosting this event. This is going to be a good one. So let's get started with the good stuff, honestly. And here's the thing. I've been struggling a little bit with, I was struggling a little bit with, sort of the subjects, the flow, this conversation, what we were going to do, because one of the things that that I want to avoid, that happens so frequently in politics today, is you kind of get caught in the whataboutism trap with people, from the other aisle of the ideological conversation, right? You start saying something, what about this and this and that, and the other person, well, what about the other? So I'm trying to avoid that. I'm trying to talk about subjects that affect all of us as human beings, and I'm looking for solutions, a more solution-driven conversation for these subjects and issues that again are coming from a non-ideological perspective. So with that being said, yeah, let's have some fun and let's talk about climate change, because that's easily one of the most depressing subjects that I can think of, today. But I think that if we focus on, figuring out what are the potential solutions, what are the viable solutions that might be in store, whether it be, the acceleration of alternative fuels, or whether it be just honestly just adapting because there's nothing left to do, because it might just be too late. I just want to get your thoughts on this, right, Professor Dungey, and perhaps provide me a picture of what it would look like to create, real momentum in the right direction when it comes to this subject.
Well, first of all, it's an extraordinarily important topic, and I'm not an expert in the science side of it, so I will avoid speaking to the actual technical and scientific side of it. But as you know, I'm a professor of political philosophy. My academic work's modern, postmodern political philosophy. And the first thing to know, or at least to approach this from a theoretical or philosophical point of view, is that climate change is a direct result of the deeper philosophical ideas we have about what human nature is, what mind is, and how it is that human beings stand in relations to the objective or the extant reality. Climate change is a direct product of the ideas about power, about acquisition, about freedom that begin to develop in the 1500s, the 1600s, and accelerate all the way through both waves of the scientific revolution, culminating in a hyper-industrial and post-industrial capitalism. So climate change, to really deal with climate change in a deeper way, we have to fundamentally reimagine and redefine our conception of what it means to be human, what mind is, what the body is, how the mind and the body and agency relate to a world that theoretically in and of itself has no intrinsic value, and then how we, stand to that world to extract its resources, and in doing so create value. That whole model, that the entire modern political/philosophical model about human nature, human freedom, power, the world, and the creation of property, that is the source of the symptom we now call climate change. So unless there's a fundamental transformation at a really profound philosophical level about what the human is, how we relate to each other and how we relate to the planet, climate change will go on.
Right.
And I wonder if this is something, and this is the paradox that I find myself sort of like in when I look at climate change, is that the people with the most to lose right now, like for example, like let's say you're an oil magnet, magnet,
like Elon Musk.
You know what I'm trying to say?
Exactly.
You're an oil tycoon, right? And all of a sudden, all these people want you to just quit your business, stop dumping all these fossil fuels into the atmosphere. Like how do you convince people with so much power and so much to lose to change course, to veer course? And the other, on the other side of the coin is where it's like the people who have the most to gain, which is the rest of us, it seemingly feels like you have little to lose because it's such an abstract sort of subject, It's so I wonder if it's like if there's a political philosophical solution to this sort of quagmire, like how can you bridge that sort of that gap between these two interests, these colliding interests?
Well, like I suggested earlier, the colliding interests and the implications they have for just one modality of life, and in this instance, climate change, is, again, I forgive me for sounding repetitive, but is a direct consequence of the core ideas we have about human agency. And I'm quite sincere about this. I'm not trying to be glib. If you think about the core ideas about modern political philosophy, if you think about what it says, right? And I'm speaking in very general terms. There are hot debates about this, and we can get into nuances. But if you keep it on the sort of core issues, it makes several important claims. Human beings are fundamentally and objectively free. That they are sort of these autonomous, free, sovereign, atomistic things occupying this material world, right? And in the more modern and scientific emergence of this, the extant world, the material world, is seen as something that in and of itself doesn't possess inherent value, right? And so you've got these objectively free, aggressive,
can you use your microphone, please? Sorry.
Rational people who are sort of find themselves in a world without inherent meaning or purpose, but sort of defined by all these potential natural resources, whether it's timber, oil, diamonds, gold, however you want to think of it. And the goal in life, in modern political philosophy, and as it executes itself in capitalism, is to take the power of one's mind and one's body, right? What is uniquely ours, our mind and our body, and to sort of inject that, to mix that with the world out there, whether it's oil or gold or fresh water or fishing, and to extract those resources. And this is all caught up in the fundamental, in the deep philosophical understanding of what property is. This is what Locke does. In the 1688s, when Locke really establishes the modern philosophical account of what property is, how human beings acquire property in a world that in and of itself has no inherent value, and then how that value becomes profitable, and you link that to capitalism, and you've got extraordinary wealth and the extraction of resources. So again, I don't want to be glib. You don't solve this problem, right, until you have a fundamental transformation in consciousness. And not just a transformation in consciousness, but what I mean by that is an alternative way in which people conceive of their own consciousness, how they conceive of it as constructed, and most importantly, relational. Relational not only to other human beings in a deep ethical way, but relational in terms of the planet.
Go ahead, sorry.
Just one question I had. I mean, my other company, which I founded and CEO of, is the Easy Charge. We are creating charging stations for electric cars. So I've invented, the charging station, and I'm in the e-mobility business as well. And the climate change and global warming is a very hot debate there. Right. And what I tend to see in the last, I don't know, 5 years, it's the tendency of, if anyone is saying something different than that they agree with climate change and global warming, then we're being bullied immediately. Like I myself, I'm let's say, a supporter and a believer of the idea of solving local pollution, like in the cities, a lot of electric cars. You solve local pollution, you get people healthier, you solve a lot of problems, but I'm not 100% convinced of that everything humanity is doing is leading to the global warming. I'm sure we have an effect on the planet, and it might be significant. But there's still an open debate about whether we are 100% influencing this global warming let's say scenario or not. And when I'm telling those ideas anywhere, either in political discussion or in any other discussion, the business discussion I'm having with other companies from e-mobility, I'm being attacked immediately. And this rhetoric I'm seeing in US political discussion as well, in scientific discussion. If you don't agree with some particular parts, but you are helping this kind of solving the problem, you're being bullied immediately. What do you think about this? Do you think this is okay, or you think there might be some change from both sides?
I just want to say, from the devil's advocate, I think from my perspective, when I think of climate change, I feel like we're all gonna fucking die. Honestly, just look at the numbers. Look at the numbers. Hold on for a second. How is it that we can put into the atmosphere trillions of tons of fucking fossil fuels, and we expect no consequence out of that? Are we serious? Trillions of tons of fossil fuels from the earth that weren't supposed to be in the air, and now they're in the air, and we're gonna and somehow we're gonna be okay. I actually appreciate the fact that that you think that it's good to think locally and work towards having a pollution-free world, but at the same time, I'm actually not gonna have kids. I actually think it's fucking selfish to have kids because of the world that we're gonna destroy. Just look at the oceans. Look at the sky.
Yeah, but now I have a counter argument for you. So you're talking about the fossil fuels and the power plants where we're doing this. And I mean, I've traded electricity my work for 7 years, for 8 years actually. So I've traded CO2 emissions, I've traded electricity, I've transferred them from one side to another. And think about it. There are 4 biggest boats in this world which take goods from China to other continents, okay? And one boat for one trip burns more and puts more CO2 in the air than all the European cars in a year, because those are not regulated, they have no filters, they have nothing. And yet we don't speak about those, we speak about cars. We put a lot of... Wait,
we should, and we really should.
Sure, exactly, but another thing is, when you talk about burning coal, and I'm against burning coal, don't get me wrong, I love batteries and I love the solar panels, and it's great. But the thing is, we're panicking about that, and we don't realize how other things affect us. For example, if one volcano erupts somewhere, it puts so much of the dust and CO2 in the air that you would not even within the 100 years of human existence. So we need to kind of counter measure those things and stay, like, you know, don't panic. That's my kind of message. Don't panic. Don't blame each other for not understanding the green agenda or whatever that is. Just let's stay unpoliticized and let's discuss those things. What can we do better to be healthier, to cleaner air, cleaner water, cleaner forests? That's what matters, because that's what we are breathing and where we are walking every day. And I think that's where we need to kind of lead our discussion, in my opinion.
Yeah, I honestly think we're fucked. But at least we can both agree that it's good to, you know, conserve.
You know what I mean?
Artists?
I'm going to have to agree with you on that, because unless you make it less abstract and deal with your actual existence and the things you're doing to contribute to the problem, I just don't see how it can change. It's, you know, the abstract of it being a global, even the concepts of using words like global or universal or any of these things it's just such an abstract in your mind. It's like using terms like billions and trillions, and, you know, once you get past a certain concept, you're sort of in the realm of the abstract and getting freaked out because of the sheer size of the total cumulative problem of 7.5 billion people. So it's really, I mean, you know, people have, you know, tossed this around a lot, and I think that when Nick's talking about relating this to capitalism and different systems of, you know, different political systems being sort of part of the problem and certainly the source, if it's, you know, when you talk about greed. But I think that also gets abstract, is when you're challenging the, you know, the way we actually, you know, do our e-commerce and how we're going to do it. I mean, I would ask, like, what's the carbon footprint of virtual reality? You know, you know, what is the carbon footprint of virtual reality? You know, on the surface, I would say, hey, I think it's better. You know, I mean, in one of my virtual worlds, I wanted to put parking stalls, and I wanted a headstone at the head of each one. Ford, GM, Toyota, you know, right in front of the parking spot. Because, you know, I'm a proponent of virtual reality, a meeting like this, instead of us all traveling to a conference somewhere, jet, you know, renting a hotel, taking a car. You know, we're at the forefront of the solution of it. However, I'm still going to question, you know, what is the carbon footprint of a virtual reality? Really? I mean, when you look at it, that ship that carried all the stuff over from China, circuit boards and a whole bunch of stuff on Amazon that I buy because it's affordable. Okay, the Oculus Rift had dropped from the $850 that I spent, you know, here in Canada for it to, you know, $529. I like that, you know, that chip.
That's because nobody wants it anymore. I'm joking.
That we're cheap. No. Anyway, do you understand what I'm saying? You know,
right.
There's a link between what you're saying about your local contribution, which has to be dealt with. But I also don't believe that if everybody with a carbon-based car, you know, were to suddenly say, you know, I'm going to get an electric car. Well, in America, that wouldn't be a good idea because electricity is coal generated. It's fossil fuel generated. Here in Canada, that's a great idea. We're all basically, you know, using hydro here. So, you know, I don't see there's a big problem with getting an electric car. However, I would wonder where those you know, those fossil fuel-based cars are going to be going if we all just suddenly take a very efficient car. A lot of those new cars are pretty efficient. If you just kind of trade them in, you're probably creating a bigger problem just in terms of the energy required to recycle all the fossil-based cars. You know, I mean, this is a little bit of a difficult thing. You know, Ford had a great idea, but, you know, it's gotten out of hand. Everybody wants 3 of them now. You know, I mean, it's like ridiculous. But in VR, you don't need that.
Exactly. Or some people do, but in VR you don't need to burn things to create things, right? We just can use the power of our minds to create things.
In virtual space these days.
But coming back to your one point, which I want to address, because, you know, which exactly they are getting lost in the discussion, and people, use arguments like that, and then it's getting lost, but they still continue using it. Like when you say, if we switch to all electric cars, I'm not a crazy greenhead or something like that. I'm being realistic, but if you switch from the diesel, let's say, or benzene to an electric car, even if 100% of the electricity which you would charge your car from will go from the coal power plant, you will still be 50% better. The reason for that is that the coal power plant is much more efficient than the diesel engine in your car, just because of the scale and filtering. So the efficiency of the best gas power plants is around about 57%, and correct me, Vita, if I'm wrong, you're also an engine trader. And the best diesel engines which are today available, they're around at 22, 23. So you are like, even if you just charge from the coal, you're still much better than if you burn locally in your engine. But nevertheless, you're absolutely right. Where do we get, if we switch all to electric cars, where do we get those cars, the old cars in? But this is a very broad discussion, of course. We can spend hours just on that topic alone.
But it was also
we easily could. And I think we're going to move on. Unless you have anything to say, Professor Dungey, regarding this subject. I have other places we want to go, because we could be here forever.
I will just respond quickly to Arthur's and Artist 3D's sort of observation about the way in which sort of paying attention to one's local placement accelerates your openness to thinking about how big abstract things like climate can affect you, right? And there's something really I want to kind of push on this a little bit, and again, forgive me for being too abstract, but when we are engaged in the sort of more immanent spaces of our consciousness, our lived reality, our communities, our houses, we tend to feel a more profound sense of the belongingness of people, the connectedness of people, right? There's this sort of a more of an awareness of a shared reality, right? Because you see it, you're talking about your community, so you see the symptoms of climate change, or you see the symptoms of disregard. You see it, and because you see it and you feel it in a more imminent way, you have this openness to a more shared reality. Now, ultimately, that's a kind of phenomenon produced by the fact that you're close to things. That type of consciousness, and in terms of how one conceives of oneself at the very core, that has to be developed, right? This idea that human beings occupy the world like a cup occupies a cupboard with consciousness. That fundamental vision of how what mind is and what language is and how we are in the world, that's a fundamentally flawed way of conceiving how we are in the world. And what something like climate change will do is slowly and inevitably, both in very good ways, it'll have some sort of painful consequences, but in very good ways, it will slowly shift the sort of human willingness to think of who they are and how they relate to other people and the sort of space they are in a fundamentally different way.
Well,
that's all.
But in all cases with a change in a climate, if you look at a before and after picture, let's say, of a glacier that's completely obliterated a valley, and then you look at one that has lost that glacier and it's suddenly got a lake in the middle of it and all kinds of, everything's grown up and it's looking beautiful and pristine. I mean, by the same token, I don't think we can sort of just blanket say climate change is a bad thing. It's actually good for some areas, bad for other areas. But good or bad may not even be the qualifier here. It just may be the idea that, this has changed now. And because we live in this sort of fixed, in many cases, situation where we can't migrate as we used to be able to as a race. We can't just migrate as the climate changes to wherever we want. We see the problems of that in Europe, and we see it, starting to show up everywhere. I mean, it's just, we've lost, the political boundary concept. The idea, this is my line here, you can't go over it. However, we need to be able to free up a little of the immigration concept so that people can migrate as they've always been able to do for thousands of years in North America anyway. This is where we get to the politics of it. It's like, if you ever saw the movie, I think there's something about a freezing of North America, and the Mexicans ended up, inviting North Americans into their area because they needed to be able to survive. They needed to be able to help people survive. This is something, empathy is key to this solutions here. And I don't buy the argument of not having kids. I have 3 kids. I have no problem with their future. I believe that they are making their future as much as we made ours. And
right.
One thing I always didn't like, and I had to stop being a member of Greenpeace, is because they kept coming to the door with dire end game results that weren't resulting in anything positive. It's just saying this is the end of the world as we know it. And, we all know it's the end of the world as we know it. But that doesn't necessarily mean it's the end of the world, intrinsically negative. I think we've got every opportunity here to make use of the panoramic solutions we've got. And part of it is VR. I mean, the fact that none of us had to take an airliner to get here.
What do you think, Cris?
There's nothing anybody can tell me. I feel like, I feel pretty strongly about the fact that we're fucking up the planet. And honestly, and it's gonna take something really terrible from happening. I think all humanity is a very reactionary species, and the moment something really, really, really bad happens, then we'll start looking around and being like, oh, okay, have we been missing something? Have we been not paying attention to this? I mean, that's what's gonna happen. Honestly, it's just I'm just waiting for that to happen, and then we'll actually start changing course. But it's cool, right? For now, we might as well just keep going the way we are. Anyway, let's keep going, because honestly, we have so much to talk about. We really do, and these are topics that I think are gonna get you guys all triggered, which is what we all came here for.
We are ready.
Professor Dungey, I have a question that I think overlaps a lot of the subject that I think I'm going to bring up, and it's the problem of money in politics. I think money in politics is a big problem pretty much everywhere in the world, but in the States it's particularly bad. And again, this is one of those places where things can get really depressing. But I want to focus on, what can the average person do to contribute to a positive future here, because it feels like money in politics is sort of the obstacle that is preventing us from ending the drug war, or it's preventing us from embracing a more open world with less military interventions. Like I think there's a lot to unwrap in where in the intersection of money and politics. What do you think?
Well, again, if I could kind of back up a little bit and contextualize this, at least from the sort of ways that I sort of deal professionally, in my academic work. I will only speak for the United States in this instance, because the examples are more complicated when you talk about Western liberal democracies emerging in Europe. So I'll speak really to the United States. But I will also speak rather philosophically. Again, sorry, artist 3D and kind of abstract way. I apologize. But there's a couple things. Artist. Yeah, perfect. When I speak to my students about this, I teach a course on modern political philosophy, and when we speak about these things, I always try to start with some of the deeper and the core philosophical ideas that help sort of guide the development of what we call politics, the way money has found its way into it, why money has found its way into it, and what are the consequences. And one of the ways I go about this is first to remind people, and again, I'm going to speak specifically now to just the United States, but I'm also going to link it to some ideas in modern political philosophy. for modern political philosophy and for its liberal variant. When I say liberal, I don't mean in an ideological sense. I don't mean right-wing, left-wing politics. When I say liberal philosophy, I mean big L, a philosophical system that governs the emergence, or of most Western liberal societies, and especially the United States. And so, in modern political philosophy, and especially its liberal variant, politics is conceived as not natural to human beings. And what I mean by that is that sort of way of rejecting the classical Greek notion of politics, the sort of Platonic and Aristotelian notion of politics, as well as a version of the Christian or Catholic notion of politics. And in both the classical, the Greek, and the New Testament Christian, there's the human capacity for politics is in us, either because we have a soul on the Christian argument, and the soul is a sort of access to God, and God has laws. So we are political by nature. And Aristotle and Plato said that we were political by nature by virtue of having reason, and it was through reason that we could reflect upon and acquire knowledge about things like justice, and therefore use that knowledge to sort of arrange our social and political lives at higher levels of consciousness. Now, in modernity, from the 1600s to our current time, and there are important reasons for this, and maybe we could do a whole nother bunch of shows about this, so I'll cut it short. But in modern political philosophy, beginning from the 1600s, all the way moving through the constitutional forms of government, and now most modern liberal democracies in the United States, North America, and Western Europe, we tend to see politics as artificial, as something that needs to be constructed by human beings. We see laws and constitutions as things that human beings make. Right? They're not natural, and they have to be constructed, and they have to be set into motion, and they've got to be maintained, and they've got to be transferred across very complex, historical time and space. So when we think about money in politics, it's first important at a really, I think, deeper level to understand how the hell it is that we think about politics at a theoretical level in the West, in the liberal Western democracies. Okay, so politics, they're invented things. Like the Constitution was an invented thing. Any of the laws are invented things, right? The regulatory processes, they're invented things. Even borders, our artist 3D was talking earlier about we're past the border stage. That's right. When we're seeing the dissolution of borders as a globally integrated economy, as technology and AI moves forward. The whole idea of a border is obviously becoming a kind of kind of quaint idea. So, but politics are a constructed thing. Okay, and you say, well, who constructs those things, right? And one of the sort of I don't want to call it a dark element of the history of liberal philosophy, because liberal philosophy likes to present itself as an egalitarian sort of philosophy in terms of it wants to see people as inherently equal and rights possessing. But there is a very profound aristocratic trend in modern political philosophy and in the modern liberal social welfare democracies. Is an extraordinarily powerful aristocratic trend. And okay, so who are those people? Those people tend to be sort of highly educated. Maybe they come from wealthy families, or they have joined this because of their involvement in capitalism. They've acquired wealth. Well, these people, they're educated, and they're economically powerful, and they understand at a core level that democracies are human constructions, right? That they are literally a set of rules and laws and regulations and policies human beings create and sort of acquire and assert power to make real and to sort of ultimately govern our lives. So people who understand this at a very deep level, right, that politics is a sort of invented construct, it's a game, that if you put yourself in a position to write those laws, right, and you kind of already are wealthy to begin with, then you're going to use the political space. You're going to use the democratic space, the political space to write rules, write policy, write tax legislation, write environmental regulation that that sort of advances your interest, not in a wholly, completely selfish sort of way. Obviously, is a broader social space that's often considered, but it's no accident that you have money in politics, and it's no accident that money continues to influence government in the way it does. The people that are there are wealthy. In America, the money is a type of expression, and so there's protections against free speech. And these people, and I don't mean this in a cynical way, I mean this just in a sort of an observant sort of way, these people acquire and exercise power, which means in a concrete way they write tax legislation, they write environmental policy, right? They write a corporate finance policy, right? I mean, lobbyists in the United States write 90% of legislation. Okay, lobbyists representing corporations, right? Investment banks, large banks, insurance companies. So again, like I said earlier, and forgive me for sounding so abstract, and hopefully I'm not boring anybody, but the problems we're talking about, not exclusively, but in very profound ways, whether it's climate change or whether it's money in politics, are symptoms. They're consequences of some of the core ideas we have in our mind about the most powerful and essential things, right? What is politics? Where does it originate? What is human freedom? Where is the source of ownership in the mind and the body? Then it gets extended into an objective world that has no inherent meaning. Okay, then we do that creates value. Now I've got property ownership, now I've got wealth, now I'm going to use that wealth to build legal and political institutions, right? So I can further sort of advance a particular conception of things.
But sorry,
go ahead.
No, I just wanted to ask you, isn't that what you're describing? Isn't that a natural evolvement of things? So if you say people have more money, more power, they execute that, and the rules are being written by them, let's say, isn't that them getting to that power also a natural step? So they were better than others? And I'm not saying I'm agreeing with that. I'm just saying that this could be kind of their argument when I'm saying, okay, once then or others, and that's kind of like an evolutionary maybe even subject here to say, better people get to power, maybe not so all the time, but you know what I mean.
Well, okay, now you're in trouble. I will apologize. now
shut down
in a fun way. No, because I've been trying to rein myself in so I don't get myself in the weeds here. But this. Okay, now we can take the conversation just one step further, right? And this is, I guess I should have been clearer in the beginning. This is where we need to go, right? I am extraordinarily suspicious about metaphysical arguments about human nature, about evolution, about certain concepts of human freedom and mind, right? So these are very dangerous, actually. In fact, you see apologists in the United States and in probably Western European countries who use a kind of social Darwinist / evolutionary argument that says, well, look, it's objectively true that there are differences in genetic capacities. There are some people who are smarter, some people who are less smarter. Those people can mobilize their talents. They're hardworking, and by the way, in a Lockean sense, what they do, they're the great capitalists. They're the great entrepreneurs. They take the great risks. They go out. These are the colonizers, right, of the 17 and 1800s. They go out there and they land their ships on these places that might already be occupied, but Western Europe didn't know about, and they plant their flag and they put their oil rigs down, and all of a sudden it's theirs, and now the place has value, and they're celebrated as these sort of people. I'm extraordinarily suspicious about those kinds of stories, right? And so when I keep referring back to this idea that slowly and perhaps more rapidly as technology emerges and the problems that are not wholly caused by human beings, I think Artist 3D is correct. These are extraordinarily complex, interdynamic systems, and human beings are part of just that dynamic, or one part, but it is also true that a lot of the things we're talking about, money in politics, sort of very vicious social Darwinist explanations for human hierarchy and the justification for the acquisition of wealth and the extraordinary gaps in wealth between humans, how human beings relate to the environment as a standing reserve to extract resources for our own wealth and our own pleasure. At core, these are philosophical ideas. Right? These are philosophical ideas, and which require sort of questioning. They require contestation, and they're not objective. There's nothing objectively necessary about social Darwinism. There's nothing objectively necessary about the modern conception of human freedom or property as an extension of ownership of one's mind and one's body. Right? These are ideas that have been sort of very powerful ideas, don't get me wrong, but they're ideas that have been developed by human beings in particular times and operationalized, okay, for very good reasons. But there's nothing objectively true about them. They're not anchored in some deep foundation, right? These things can end, and in fact, they're ending now. We are at the end. We're coming to the end of what you could call the modern philosophical and / capitalist paradigm. Again, I'm no critic of capitalism. I'm no Marxist here. I'm not making that argument, but I'm saying this is part of a paradigm of thought.
It's the end of an objective reality.
It's the end of a belief in objective reality.
A belief in an objective reality. And I think when you get closer to the core of what you're saying, talking about consciousness, I mean, and I personally think consciousness is a dangerous thing without self-awareness. I believe it's got intrinsic dangerous qualities if you're simply conscious, because being simply conscious, you can go about manipulating the world around you without any kind of self-awareness. You can make comments and tweets without any kind of self-awareness. Consciousness in itself is a tool, only a good tool, when you're aware of it.
Yeah, well, see, I mean, again,
and the impact it has on the people around you. When I say something in this forum, I realize that I'm saying something in consciousness. It's up to everybody's self-awareness to determine whether or not that actually fits in any kind of context with themselves. It doesn't have to be an objective relationship with what I'm saying, but it can be, you can take it in and subjectively decide whether anything you or I or anyone is saying is something that's going to enhance and add to your understanding or your awareness of the world around you.
I would take it a little further and at least be honest about my theoretical positions. I'm extraordinarily suspicious of the idea of a space between consciousness and self-awareness, right? I, from my own sort of philosophical leanings, I'm quite postmodern in these sorts of things. And so for me, consciousness is simultaneous with self-awareness, and self-awareness is always already sort of defined and animated by a series of ideas given to us through language with the specific meanings and their values and purposes.
You're saying that there's a simultaneity between, because somebody's conscious, they're suddenly going to be self-aware. I have a feeling that you're incorrect there, because I've been conscious all my life. However, I haven't been, I've been developing in my life. If I look at it from day one to now, I'm far more aware than I was when I was merely conscious. And I think true. When I did psychedelics, I knew that I had gained a new awareness, a new relationship. And virtual reality, the first time I put the headset on, there was a sense of situational awareness that was far and beyond anything that I ever expected to be able to actually have a situational awareness so immediate that my studio suddenly converted into this. Like in all directions, thousands of miles. I had to walk here, by the way, Sasha. You left me on the other side. Okay.
That's by the way.
Here, okay.
There are teleporters everywhere, but okay.
There was no teleporter, anything else. But this is VR. This is the beauty of this new situational awareness that we're able to put ourselves in, and I have a feeling that it's having a far more profound effect on people than initially think.
Absolutely.
You know, we're here. Like, I mean, I don't know where everybody's from, but I mean, we're from thousands of miles apart here. But
we're all sitting.
You know, this is the end of an objective reality, and one in which we're now sharing kind of an immediacy of reality, a much more, you know, if you look at Kurzweil's concept of a singularity, and you see that time itself, I mean, everybody's in a different time zone here, we're all coming in here. This, when Sasha said this is going to be at 9 in the morning, I had to literally reorient my whole time sense in thousands of miles. I had to walk here, by the way, Sasha. You left me on the other side of the bridge over there. Okay.
That's on purpose, by the way.
Miles from here, okay?
There are teleporters everywhere, but okay.
We'll talk about that later. There was no teleporter, anything like you know, but this is VR, you know, this is the beauty of this new situational awareness that we're able to put ourselves in. And I have a feeling that it's having a far more profound effect on people than they initially think.
Absolutely.
You know, we're here. Like, I mean, I don't know where everybody's from, but I mean, we're from thousands of miles apart here.
Yeah, but we're all sitting
here. You know, this is the end of an objective reality, and one in which we're now sharing kind of an immediacy of reality, a much more, you know, if you look at Kurzweil's concept of a singularity, and you see that time itself, I mean, everybody's in a different time zone here, we're all coming in here. This, when Sasha said this is going to be at 9 in the morning, I had to literally reorient my whole time sense in order to be up, because I usually go to bed at 3, you know, and this is like really early morning for me. This is, and so we all, because we're all commingling with a different time sense, our body clocks are bringing together an immediacy to this reality that is based on.
But yet, for all of us here, it's sunny right now, or, you know, it's you know, we're in the kind of same time zone in virtual already, which is a cool concept
I'm
as
still
well.
having my first coffee, okay, getting kind of active today. So it could be, I could have an advantage over someone who's about to go to sleep.
Right.
We don't want to know what Chris is up to here.
Oh, I'm just smoking weed. I'll be honest with you guys. I'm just smoking lots of weed here.
Guys, I have to beep and cut so many things from this video. I just post it like it is. I warn you. I'll just dump it on the
It's legal where I am. Okay?
Exactly.
It's totally legal.
If Elon Musk can do that, you can do that too.
Against smoking marijuana.
Hey, if Elon Musk can do that, you can do that too.
Altered states bring on a paranoia in themselves just because you can think it through.